in hopes that that works as well. So good morning. It's almost afternoon. It's almost Friday. I just want to introduce myself for those who did dial in. We may have some latecomers. I really appreciate you taking the time, and in large part, to take care of yourself. This is a deliberate action just to tune in. I hope that you get something from it, not just a little bit of reprieve from your busy day. I hope that there is something that will be thought-provoking and or actionable for you by the end of this presentation. So to introduce myself, my name is Demski. I am a licensed clinical psychotherapist practicing, so I'll have some clinical anecdotal feedback and so forth, but I'm also assigned to Marquette University as the account executive. So that means I get to help out whenever and as needed when it comes to really addressing larger groups. So this is, I feel very fortunate to at least have 10, if not 11 of you on. It's a better reach, frankly, than just distributing what passive promotions we have related to a brochure or a posting and so forth. So I really hope that you stay tuned, and it won't be all that interactive, but I really hope that you sustain and maintain your focus for sure. So let's start with the title. And again, just a quick remind you as far as any kind of interactive, feel free to chat. I know Wendy Butler is helping out and just kind of minding the chat room in case there's questions. But I'll get through the content by all means, and we'll go from there. So thank you again for joining. The title is very deliberately selected as Healthy Coping Amidst Challenging Times, as if you have a choice, right? As if you have a choice. Yes, you do. I'm here to say you have a choice related to healthy or not. We have to cope. And granted, challenging times, we can really sidestep in terms of what we're in the midst of, but I want to focus just on that healthy coping. You have choices about coping, healthy or not. By default, we have this human operating system. We've got this really evolved brain, which continues to learn by the patterns, the thought patterns, the feeling patterns, and the subsequent actions. Our own human operating system will continue just to sort of survive and keep us going, moving ahead, and for the most part, adapt. But does not mean that we're going to be healthfully adapting or practicing resilience. So I do say this, I do type this, I do underscore, if I could, healthy coping amidst challenging times, especially unprecedented challenging times. We're all survivors of our own making, for sure. We've been through a lot, but with the compilation of what we're faced with, as well as now looking at a semester starting, right? The school year, what does that normally bring? Never mind, what is it going to bring? Certainties and uncertainties. So this presentation will focus on your healthy coping, specifically your decisions involved, many opportunities throughout the day involved in taking a healthy path, pausing, reflecting, etc. Because no matter what, we're going to get through it. We're going to get through it, right? We're going to cope. We're going to adapt. But the healthy part, that qualitative part, is really ours for the making. So I hope that it makes more sense, but healthy coping amidst challenging times. I welcome you again to this presentation. So first slide, and some of you folks might be just dialing in to listen. So I won't be reading the slides, but I'll be referring to a little bit more about what is written in the slides. But really the content is verbal. And so we'll go from there. So how to stay sane, first of all, never mind healthy, never mind coping, like how do you keep going? I alluded to the fact that we do have this human operating system, which mechanically and functionally and cognitively, we get up and then we output, we go through the motions, if nothing else. And that's good and not so good. I mean, it's a statement of fact. By default, we're going to get going. We're going to do something. We're going to look for areas of being productive, all right? So staying sane for sure. I'm thinking, again, we're wired to at least get up, to keep moving. But when we're looking at, again, that qualitative feature, we want to stay sane, but we want to be healthy in the process. We don't even know what the process is going to look like for each of us. So number one, breathe. And I mean really breathe. If I were there, I would be standing, whereas like most of you, I'm telecommuting and I'm sitting a whole heck of a lot of time. When I say breathe, it is so fundamentally profound. So I don't want to minimize this because we take breathing for granted, but just know that we really, on a regular basis, just use about 1/3 of our lung capacity, right? So we typically live in a kind of a shallow breathing because we're excited, because we're moving on, because we're thinking fast, because we're like all of that. We very rarely, unless we purposely, deliberately, right, take a full cleansing breath. So when I say breathe, I don't mean just by virtue of what comes out naturally. We really want to take the time to fully breathe, diaphragmatically breathe, etc. You'll also notice that odds are most of you are sighing more throughout the day. And that is this innate physical response to a body that is, and a mind that is grieving, that is coping, that is trying to process what is uncertainty and some of the unknown. You'll notice that when people are literally grieving the loss of a loved one, but even the change of a routine like that, you'll notice ourselves just spontaneously sighing. Oh my gosh, acknowledge that and like just, be grateful about that because my body's working. My body's working to really, in a cathartic way, try to help myself. So deep breaths on purpose. That also, from a self-regulation perspective, really helps us regulate the intake of oxygen, which also means, right, the blood, more circulation, okay? Things aren't falling asleep in our toes or our legs. We're really trying to fully utilize all of our faculties, which sometimes we don't do. We are becoming, by virtue of especially these work schedules these days, more of a sedentary nation, okay? There is a sedentary disease, if you will. Never mind obesity and cortisol and all that good stuff. But when we can stand up, some people have standing desks. Some people are able to take calls when they're standing by virtue of their headsets. When in doubt, try to let it flow, figuratively and literally, right? Also want to mention stretching your arms, doing some shoulder rolls, reaching towards the ceiling, because you'll notice the more sedentary, this is so important, the more sedentary our body is, the more fixed, well, first of all, we tighten up, and then we tend to ache. We tend to not be as flexible in our old age. Unless we do some stretching. So we know that from a physical or a somatic perspective, that's really important. But I'm saying holistically, it's really important because think about this. It's another indicator from our body's perspective that if our body or our muscle groups are tightening up because we're sitting and we're not really letting that flow on purpose, think about this. As we tighten, as we get more rigid, as that also lends itself to a fixed way of thought. Mind and body, body and mind. There is a connection here, folks. There is a connection between sitting still all day and then getting stuck in thought cycles, right? So it's really important to keep that fluid. The easiest way is to, again, stand up, to breathe, etc. But be assured that that's also really, really helping just that cerebral, that cognitive, that human operating system when it comes to our thoughts and our feelings. We are less likely to be rigid, less likely to be reactive when we have a flow established, okay? So you get the idea right there. Again, that's just, again, whether it comes on instinctively because your body creates a sigh, embrace it, and or purposely do a 5-second breath. If I were there in purpose, I would tell you that there's actually some mechanics to doing this, not just from a diaphragmatic basis, but also a Control-Alt-Reset, like if we were a computer, because the 5-second breath is very, very key for lots of things, and there's science behind this, but really the takeaway is 5 seconds, and it's very It's very, the cadence of 5 seconds is the same. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. But you want to use 5 seconds and you want to breathe in for 5 seconds. You want to hold it for 5 seconds, again, same cadence, and then you want to exhale. And not like, right, which is at least my natural tendency, because we're exhausted, right? So the same cadence, and it takes practice. And if you want to really, really if you want to excel, go up to 6, go up to 8. If you're a parent, you can model this. If you're at work, you can model this. Again, in attempt to Control, Alt, Delete, reset yourself, in attempt to reclaim a moment for yourself, so to speak. But again, 5 breaths in, holding it for 5 breaths, and then exhaling it for 5 breaths. The more calculated and the more smooth that cadence is, the more you've been able to establish your own regulation. Again, that's blood pressure, that's pulse, that's heart rate, that's, again, a way to reclaim in a moment of something that maybe we don't have exactly some sense of mastery or feelings over. So that's going to help if you practice it. It's going to practice it. Or like I say, with some of those signs, sometimes that body will catch up to you, right? Or sometimes you'll find yourself taking a deep breath, albeit out of frustration or after a troubling call or interaction or in preparation. Again, embrace it. But my thought for you, my challenge really is trying to deliberately practice it. If you really, really want to go bonkers, then stand up and take a deep breath at the same time. But we have our body, all the faculties within our mind and our body will work more cooperatively, integratively, if we allow it to. And we have to practice that. Okay, moving forward. Whew, validating your feelings. I'm not sure if you remember that song, and I'm not going to cue the music at this point, but don't worry, be happy. It's so not cutting it at this point, right? I mean, that's almost like superficial breathing. Yes, we breathe with 1/3 of our lung capacity. Yes, we try to blow things off, distract, get preoccupied, trying to stay ultimately busy. Those are our techniques to, again, sort of almost frivolously kind of blow things off. And it helps for a while, but don't worry, be happy is just not going to cut it long term, especially since we are still embarking, we're still in the process of readjusting and resetting and coping with some degree, great degree, of additional uncertainty, okay? So don't worry, be happy. Please understand that it doesn't work for anybody by all means, and the fact that you can't compartmentalize it, the fact that you can't drink it away, you can't run it away, you can't busy it away, you can't distract yourself away. We have all these incredible coping mechanisms that could turn into vices, but know that we have to be much more deliberate with what we do, with what we feel when we feel it, okay? So the idea is not to dismiss it, but we'll talk about that. So validating your feelings is so key. There are a lot of very real things to be concerned about. I am not here to minimize or make light of or soften or soft pedal any of this, right? We are in a pandemic. Who else can say that? Everybody. But who else can say that they've been in one before? I mean, much less we know the outcome of this, etc. Very real things to be concerned about. Our physical health, especially if we have compromised physical health, or we're caring for those who we touch, who are responsible for with compromised health or immune systems. We have very real things to worry about in terms of returning to work. What does that look like? Workspace, work output, what does that look like? Yes, to be concerned. Yes, to understand that there are a lot of situational, environmental, social, and political unrest, right? Social injustice, political tension. It's election year. There are so many things, right? And again, the idea is not to be oblivious to any of these stressors. Understand that we have to take them in, but the goal is not letting them consume us, not letting them preoccupy or define us. I am worried. No, I'm Anne, right? I am distraught. Okay, sometimes I am. Feelings and emotions, much like thoughts, are fleeting if you allow them to come and go naturally. It is when we as human beings perseverate, right? We loop, and then we connect the dots to what else this means. We have contingency plans. We have backup plans. We're just worry mongers, as though in anticipation of what might happen, it's actually going to happen, as though we're more prepared for it if it does happen. Let me tell you a statement of fact. Our brain and our emotions, we can't decipher the difference between something that we anticipate might happen and is happening. Our body and our mind, our entire integrative operating system reacts accordingly. So even if we're thinking something might happen, our body and our mind, we've already gone there. The body cannot distinguish between a hypothetical stressor and an actual stressor. So be careful with that. Be careful with that. I get we want to plan. I get that our mind races, but be careful with that, because we are subjecting ourselves unnecessarily when you remember that fact. So yes, there are things to be concerned about. It's normal to experience anxiety, worry, and fear. Please know that the average feeling, right, is less than 10 seconds. We compound it with thoughts, interpretations, and then meaning. We do that just by nature. We are thinking, we are interpreting beings, period. I'm here to say we also have control over that. That's something we don't always practice. That's part of our own personal development. The older you get, the more patient you get typically. Well, that wasn't by default. You learn things didn't play out the way you maybe thought they would and so forth. So we have to embrace and honor the feelings that we have as they come up. Anxiety, worry, fear. We have to, right? I'll just tell you from a clinical perspective, I have seen more generalized anxiety, generalized dysthymia or depression. People cannot put their finger on why, as if there wasn't just one stressor, probably, in my thinking. But this generalized anxiety and worry and fear, until we start to peel that back and really understand the feeling, acknowledge the feeling, name the feeling, right? If we can name it, we're more apt to be able to support it, challenge it, change it, conquer it. But people are in this fugue almost, right, of this anxiety or worry, because it's scary. It's scary to feel there, and it's scary to stay stuck there. But one way we can unravel that, please know, is to put labels on that. As an example, whether I'm a clinician, I mentioned, but just the quicker you can put a label on what am I feeling at this moment, never mind what is my world outlook on what's going on. At this moment, take inventory, take stock. Am I angry? Am I lonely? What's the overriding feeling? Am I grieving? Am I resentful? Am I vulnerable? Because think about this, the solutioning for these feelings are very different, very different, right? If I feel vulnerable, if I feel angry, solutioning for that in that moment, if I can, at least one feeling, I can solve for that. I can, in a compassionate way, be able to accommodate that. But the quicker we can feel or name the feeling, the more likely we're able to get through what feels like getting stuck, this quagmire, right? But the quicker we can see our way through it, name it, solve for it. And granted, we don't just ever have one feeling, okay? I get it. But if we start to practice tuning in those dials, that's the point. Pay attention. And rather than just being fearful of being fearful, right, dissect it a little bit more. We have that ability. God, our frontal lobes, that's what distinguishes us from an animal. We can think, we can interpret, provided we stay in the present moment. That's the key. That's why people love mindfulness, because it gets them in the present, so they're not all in the back of their brain with a monkey mush, like working on survival. Who do I need to, defend or persecute, kind of a thing. Anyway, I'll move on. So I am seeing clinically this generalized anxiety and depression. And granted, there are just a whole host of reasons for that to fully validate why it's there, but to fix, to solve, or to combat, really to mitigate, is about labeling it, naming it, because then that helps peel it back a little bit more. So acknowledge your feelings, right? We're able to deal with them in a constructive way, the more likely we are to label them. There's a saying, we can't fix what we don't know. And I think that also applies. Okay. Probability or possibility, great distinction, right? Again, all these worries, and I'm thinking pandemic is really what's on top of mind, potentially returning to work, you know, phasing into all those implications and ramifications. This is another way to, we're going to walk through another way to really focus on that balance of rational and emotive thoughts, right? Again, we have feelings on purpose. We have thoughts on purpose. They're there. They're not just random. They are there to be cared for, to be acknowledged, and to be dealt with. And feelings pop up for a reason. But we also have to really, really take responsibility for countering what is emotional versus what is rational thought. Because if you're like me, well, if you're like most human beings, we tend to lean into one or the other, right? Hardcore facts, stick to the facts. Well, okay, got to tend to that softer side then in terms of some of the feelings, the adjustment feelings. Conversely, there are some of us that lean in toward more of the feelings, more of the emotive side. Well, we've got to counter that. So you know yourself best. It's always a delicate balance, but there's got to be both sides represented. So probability or possibility, right? When you look at statistics, and I'm not here to say what news source to tune into. I'm not here to take a stance by any means, but from a math perspective, is it a possibility or a probability? Okay, death from COVID as an example. It is possible, but it's highly unlikely for most Americans. Contracting COVID-19 is hard enough, and certainly we are seeing that there has been a surge as of late. Dying from the disease still remains gratefully, graciously, and wonderfully extremely low. I'm just making the point between us being able to vet out or begin working with that rational and emotive sides, those sides, right, to make sure that we are staying grounded and balanced and not overwrought or defined by one or the other. So subsequently, we want to make choices lifestyle choices, individual choices, actionable plans, thought patterns based on probability and not possibility. If you can see the slide, it says post-traumatic stress or post-traumatic growth. Clinically speaking, we've all been traumatized, period. Now that's not a workers' comp claim. That's not a reason to, that isn't anything in and of itself, but the situation is ripe. The conditions are here. Never mind if you had a pre-existing mental health concern or not, although about half of the Americans have. The point is, it's because of our view, our general outlook. Do we catastrophize things? Do we stick our head in the sand? Those types of things, especially with this sort of forced rest being off campus for the past 3 months. We probably have become more aware of our general outlook on life. It's become more apparent, probably, in terms of catastrophizing, in terms of being overwrought and really just kind of wanted to hide, etc. So I ask you to think a little bit about that, because we were forced to kind of reflect and get to know ourselves, whether we liked it or not. But use that insight as you're returning to a different routine. I'm never going to say normal, because that is relevant or relative, and it's not a fair statement. But we have decisions to make every single day, and we have opportunities to really come out of what has been traumatic as another stressor, a chronic stressor perhaps, thereafter developing symptoms in aggregate, or we have the opportunity to seize, right, as using this as post-traumatic growth. There are so many studies done on resilience, or grit even. I read a book just not recently, but Angela Duckworth that studied, West Point grads. The point is, what does it take? Well, each of us hardiness, resilience. It takes something different, but it first starts with knowing ourselves in terms of what do we need for the fortitude and the determination to persist. Okay, so there isn't one size that fits all by any means, nor ought there be. Post-traumatic stress or post-traumatic growth really is a matter of choice. And from a neurochemical perspective, I'll just say this. There's also another saying that I think you might have heard before, but the neurons that fire together, wire together. I use this so much in my clinical practice. If you're used to thinking a certain way and have these common denominators, the world is this, I feel this, I am this, I'm not this. If we end up back in our monkey mush brain in the back, again, we're on survival mode, and it's purely, well, it's very fundamental. I would just say that the more we challenge sort of recircuitry with our neurons, right, in terms of pausing and looking for a different meaning or not jumping to a conclusion, those neurons are less likely to be bundled and wired together. Think about this. The more we see life, a relationship, a job, the more we have a fixed way of seeing it, that's all we're going to see. That's all we're going to see. That's all we're going to see. So the neurons that fire together are wired together. We need to unbundle them, period. And that's where the growth comes from, as opposed to, oh my word, there's more of the same. I've got more proof that it's more of the same, which is not the point, right? Not the point, hopefully. Okay. I do want to say one more thing about the post-traumatic growth. And I work with, just several different employers, industries, academic and otherwise. And as people are returning to work, what is most notable is as they're physically returning to work and emotionally preparing themselves to return to work, however that means, right? Again, you're looking at a whole different schedule. I doubt it's the same one as was before, but you're looking at variables and you're making choices. And for some people who are automatic pilot and just put their butt in that seat when they get back on campus or, you know, in their office or in their cube or even in their car to go to work, they get overwhelmed because they haven't anticipated any deliberate actions to mitigate sort of that onslaught of, oh my gosh, oh my gosh. So I'm just here to say, like, expect a little bit of that flush and flurry. Expect a little bit of that because you're operationalizing going back to work when A, you're not feeling okay. No one's feeling okay. And B, nobody can guarantee that, you know, these stressors are not going to affect you in one way or another. So we want to come prepared, planned, deliberate. And we have opportunities as we prepare to do that emotionally and physically with routines. That's the difference between whether this perpetuates our stress or we have growth opportunities. Never before have we seen more people's compassion. Never before have we had this forced rest, potential reflective thought, maybe recategorizing, reprioritizing, slower pace. Okay, how much of that do you want to bring? How much of that can you bring? I get work needs work. Work needs work of you. I get it. But how much of that can you integrate into your new normal as you continue to cope, et cetera, et cetera? Huge distinction. And we have control over that. Okay. So another technique or another approach to staying sane, healthy coping, et cetera, is scheduling some worry time. There are those of us that are good at compartmentalizing, and then those of us that are not so good. And we each have different challenges depending on what side of the fence you might be. So when we, again, knowing that we will, when we feel overwhelmed with thoughts and or feelings, depending where you're wired to tune into most, understand that on purpose, we can schedule a worry time. And that worry can be, again, from a cognitive perspective or an emotional perspective. Doesn't matter. You know yourself. But put it on the shelf. We have to practice doing that so they are not consuming. Because I'll tell you this, if we don't take control and begin to regulate more, right, what'll happen is our body, if we don't attend to, if we just cope and just kind of go through the motions of just what's next, I will just tell you, our body physically, our body produces more somatic concerns, headaches, GI problems, sleep problems, irritability, aches and pains, right? And then if we don't pay attention to those sort of pink flags, if you will, that our body's producing. Remember, we have feelings and thoughts and symptoms for a reason. Underlying what's underneath that, if we don't address it, guess what? We get a whole new host of more symptoms, more indicators that something within us needs to be attended to, nurtured, taken care of, acknowledged, whatever it is. Whatever it is. I'm not saying everybody should go to counseling, okay? I happen to represent the EAP, happen to be a therapist. That's not so much the point as it is understand the human operating system will do this whether we like it or not. So best that we, right, get in the driver's seat. Schedule worry time. And again, worry could be cognitive, it could be emotional, doesn't matter. But schedule a time where you know you will attend to that. And know that you're going to vet these things out. Sometimes people do this before they go to sleep because that's when really they feel overwhelmed. Well, make a list. Honor what's coming up, people. It's not random stuff, okay? Make a list, whatever it is, however it is, chicken scratch on your phone. I'm still old school with writing things down. Take note, all right? Or if you're at work or what have you, take note of those things, knowing that you will address them. We want to honor those. We have feelings and thoughts and they're there for a reason. Record them. So then find a time when it makes most sense. I'm also here to say, be careful. If you are planning to vet this out. Oops. Can you guys go on mute? Oops. I need a little bit of background.
So I will go back on that.
Okay.
On that thing I said.
I'm going to try to put everybody on mute if I know how.
That was, I did see your email before with the article. But you.
Oh, good. That worked. Very good. Schedule worry time. Maybe that's their worry time. Don't know. So we want to compartmentalize it and know that there will be a time to vet this out rationally and emotively. Again, it's good for all of us. I would just caution you, quick caveat here. This really does, first of all, help with teasing out what is anxiety versus what is fear, because anxiety is more of that nagging thought, like I got to do something, but you feel like you're just like chasing your tail. Anxiety is also very, very, it's futile. It's not productive, as opposed to fear. Fear is much more productive because it's actionable. So this is a process to vet out anxiety versus fear. And I would just say, if this is your worry time and you're vetting it out, and maybe you're doing it with someone, a spouse, a friend, a trusted somebody, be careful who you choose because you want objectivity. You want a sounding board. You want someone to listen, to hear, to see, to whatever, to join you in this process. But we all have a handful of people in our life who are kind of negative. And so be careful about that. You know, choose wisely is all I say about that. Okay? So we will have thoughts and feelings. We don't want to be consumed by them or have them define us. So schedule your worry time. Oops. Going to the next slide. Put worry in perspective. Okay, so prepare, plan, right? You know, we have prudent guidelines. We have guidelines, my goodness, in society these days, in public places. We have guidelines for health, for safety, for security, for returning to campus. Don't be reckless, of course. Take precautions. Take precautions, knowing that what is within our control we need to abide by and listen to what the latest has been found in terms of appropriate precautions. Control what you can. That helps put worry in perspective in terms of, well, cognitively, but also behaviorally. Control what we can as it suits you. There are some people that really, really like control and predictability, And there are some people who don't typically like it, but might need a little bit now. It's an actionable strategy to really kind of operationalize behaviorally, operationalize some predictability in life. So for those who did like routine, reinforce the routine, get a calendar and really go at it, especially when you're looking at a transition to returning to campus, or, you know, kids potentially restarting school, or you're looking at a big transition. Maybe we want to reinforce the routine, if we were routine oriented to begin with, by getting more specific and or expanding the calendar. Okay, if you don't typically, you typically kind of are a little bit more spontaneous and so forth, I'm asking you to consider being a little bit more routine, because if we have a routine, it's less to think about what am I going to eat, how am I going to drive there, you know, what am I going to eat for lunch, even these mindless things. If we have more of a predictable routine, understand that our body interprets this as predictability. So amidst all the pandemic and social and all of that unrest, we still can take a chapter of this and reclaim it as our own by establishing some routine. If you want to get really crazy with this, what people are saying is, yes, predictability is key. We live with predictability. Think of your role as a team member. Think of your role as a parent. Think of your role in a relationship, and think of your role as a worker. This transcends pretty far. If you want to get a little bit more with it, I don't know more what, but you can deliberately make changes back to post-traumatic stress or post-traumatic growth. What deliberately do I want to plan? What deliberately do I want to add in? And or what deliberately do I want to omit? Maybe working during lunch. Maybe deliberately make changes, right? Seize and maximize the control you have. What have we learned from all of this? So control what you can as it suits you. Remember, possibility versus probability, but it starts with tuning in. What am I feeling? What am I feeling? And then really vetting it out in terms of the thoughts that are associated with that. What is actionable? What isn't actionable? Maybe I do need some more information, etc. Okay? And certainly EAP, this is one commercial break, I guess, for the Employee Assistance Program. We are available via Zoom and telephonically if you're having difficulty just sorting through all of this. Maybe you have a predisposition to be more anxious or be more depressed. You don't even need that. I mean, like I said, we are seeing much more in a different way. People are not, you'd think we have this onslaught of calls. People are holding it together, just waiting. Unfortunately, I'll be quite frank, when people are calling, the acuity of the clinical concern has increased. So it's more serious when they finally decide to call and get help. That's why I'm also very, very happy that some of you are tuning in today and staying attentive to trying to chip away at what we know we're all being influenced, affected, etc. by, but knowing that we have to really get some reinforced support as we continue this path. So let's practice. I'm not there, but I think you'll get the gist of it. You can do this anytime during the day. In fact, really the challenge is to seize an opportunity to do this, and this will make more sense when I explain. You can also use this in reference to a happy place. I've got pictures of when I've been in the middle of a waterfall. God knows I can't swim, but I was sitting on a rock. So again, you can use previous experiences. You can look for experiences, or you can do it where you are right now, literally where you're sitting, where you're standing. Here's the thing: it's multi-purpose. Self-grounding, it brings you into the present, which is wonderful. That present moment versus the back of your brain, right? It helps you sort of clear things, Control-Alt-Delete. And it also refreshes you. Okay, so what you want to do is, the objective here is tune out the thoughts, the feelings, and that little vicious cycle that happens with thoughts, feelings, right? We're tuning that down. It's never going to go away because we're deliberately tuning into our God-given senses, Sight, sound, smell, touch, feel. It doesn't even matter which 5, which 4, which 3, which 2, which 1. It works just the same. But present day, again, in retrospect or during the day, maybe you seize a moment when you've taken a walk or you've taken a breath of fresh air outside. The point is, lock it in. Lock it in so it's not transient. 5 things in one moment, you say it out loud, 5 things you see around you, right? Ba, 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 ba. Just observational. Move on. 4 things you can feel. Not feel like, oh, I feel this. No, tactily, right? The feel of your skin, the air, etc. 4 things you can feel with taking an inventory, a body scan. 3 things you can hear. 2 things you can smell. And 1 thing you can taste. Please try to practice this. It really, really helps. And again, look for an opportunity throughout the day. That helps as well. Think of the previous vacation or just a good conversation. Let me just tell you this, if you're a parent and there's some, I don't know, chaos going during dinner time, you can facilitate this process without them even knowing what you're doing. Sneak up on them by out loud saying 5 things that you see. Oh, different hairstyle. Sally? Oh, wow, this is a different serving plate. Dinah? Whatever. Just notice 5 things. You don't even need an adjective. Follow right away. They'll be like looking at you. Follow right away 4 things you can feel. Oh, this air conditioning feels great. Or what have you. Again, you don't even need the descriptive adjective. 4 things you can feel. 3 things you can hear, 2 things you can smell, 1 thing you can taste. You can even elicit that in junior. What do you taste, junior, when you're down to that 1, etc. Okay? So seize an opportunity. It's a good practice. You'll become more in tune to it by default once you work this muscle, so to speak, and you can do it reflectively, etc. or in reference. Okay. I'm going to switch over real quick just to a quick segue to remind you folks of this invaluable resource. And I'm going to unmute you because I do have a couple questions, but I will not call on people. And employee assistance program, I'm just kind of curious. You can unmute yourselves if you'd like to. I left it like that. You have the EAP. Everybody in your household has what I'm going to be very, very quickly explaining, so please bear with me, folks. It is a confidential resource. I do give reports to Marquette University on an aggregate basis, just so that they keep paying the bills. It's there whether you use it or not. I'll just tell you, I took a peek at Marquette University utilization, and I'm curious, from what you know so far about EAP or what you might recall from EAP, what do you think the utilization rate is for EAP assistance? Counseling, legal, financial, what % would you say is average? Anybody? I'm looking at the chat. Anybody? 20%. Coral, thank you for responding, first of all. Anybody want to go higher or lower? 20%. I hope you're still paying attention. Tim, thank you, 25. Oh God, we're going with Tim, 25, thank you. Jean, 10. Okay, thank you very much for weighing in on that. I'm always curious like what you think, because especially now, and I did the Q2 report, so I have an idea of kind of what's coming down the pike at this point. Casey also thinks 10%. I'll tell you, remember, it's not just counseling, but people typically think of counseling, therefore we've got a stigma. I don't have to call, I don't need to call, I don't want to call, all that stuff. A couple of statistics about your population. Please know that we are at a 4% utilization rate, right, to date. I'll give you, and I'll go through the components of what you can call in for. You can call in more than once and for more than one thing, mind you, okay? Here's another staggering statistic. 84% of those cases so far are employees. So I just would hope that by virtue of a brochure or a reminder, anybody living in your household, doesn't matter insurance, doesn't matter dependent age, doesn't matter. They're all eligible to call in. They don't have to call in through you, but because of you, mindset, of course, is if we can help somebody that's living with you, we're indirectly helping you. And that's the point. Very, very liberal eligibility. Okay, so 84% have been employees. We want to see more spouses, dependents. Okay, we'd like to see more of that for sure. All right, I'm going to go through real quick what these, and I'll give you a little bit of information too about what we're seeing as far as Marquette utilization, which is really not different than our book of business at this point. So EAP, is free from the hire date, no eligibility related to insurance, not a big deal, unrelated, etc. We don't even really ask anything except for, oh, what employer are you calling from, right? So we can at least tabulate that utilization mark. Types of problems, oh my goodness. Who doesn't have some of these, especially these days? We did address the average utilization rate. The average utilization rate is just a little bit shy of where you are as Marquette goes, but it does kind of vacillate between 3 and 5, and I've been in the business for over 25 years. So types of problems, real normal bumps in the road. The goal there, of course, is address things before they accumulate, because they will unless they're addressed. And then let's move on. EAP overview. As an employee of Marquette, please know that anybody has access to up to 6 sessions per issue. So if you've got a parenting issue in the first part of the year, but you want to call back because you want to rule out depression or you want more mindfulness strategies, again, you don't have to have a diagnosis. That's the idea, is to call in before you're broken or bleeding, right, or diagnosable. If you need 6 sessions, if you need beyond 6 sessions with one of our EAP counselors, they'll help you get into the appropriate resource within your medical insurance, because sometimes that's a difficult thing to navigate, period. I'm going to go into work-life services, because that's where we've seen an increase. Work-life resources. There's a study that says, hey, we can save you X amount of hours from hunting and pecking and looking at, websites to find resources and referrals. One of those categories related to work-life balance is child care referrals. And so it's always a zip code search. Remember, this is always the same phone number. Our office is located on 92nd and Capitol. If you call between 8 and 4, that's who you're talking to. It's one of our employees. We don't farm out a lot of this stuff, including our own staff members. We have Aurora offices throughout the city. So if you're looking for anything back to school, tutoring, those types of things, we do searches, and you can imagine that this one has increased because we've got a lot of sort of tenuous schedules that we're playing out, and we're looking for more information. Legal consultation, again, not counseling and not childcare resources or referrals, but legal consultation. This has been the one that has skyrocketed for lots of good reasons. People are not really tending necessarily to their emotional health until it's unfortunately becoming more urgent. But for some reason, throughout this past quarter, we're seeing an uptick in legal consultations. The deliverable, of course, is calling in 800, telling us a little bit about what area of law. You can see the slide. You can see there are various differences with attorney specialties. The point is, and we have a website that shows simple living wills, medical power of attorney, those types of forms that are public, certainly. And so when you do get a consultation, it's a 30-minute consultation. We do try to find somebody in your area in case you want to hire that attorney, because they will give you their services beyond that consultation at a 25% discount. And they don't start billing at that point. That's an arrangement that you deliberately talk about. So this is the area we're seeing a lot of wills. We're seeing a lot of different questions in terms of just lawyer questions, estate planning, those types of things, consumer issues, landlord rules, regulations, those types of things. So we've really seen an uptick on this. And who can't really benefit from talking to an attorney at one point or the other? The other uptick we're seeing is at financial services. We're not giving out loans, but again, it's a half an hour consultation with the respective financial consulting subject matter expert. So you'll call us, you'll tell us a little bit about what you're looking at in terms of is it a tax question? Is it reconsolidating debt? Is it pros and cons of bankruptcy? Is it, hey, I've not been spending frivolously anymore because I'm shut in, and so maybe I want to, what makes the best bang for my buck in terms of improving my credit score? Those types of questions. So people are calling proactively, not just responsively. But the deliverable is, of course, a half an hour telephonic consultation. And if you end up with a CPA, if your questions are about taxes, they'll give you their services minus 25% as well. Last but not least, and thank you very much for staying attentive, I hope, our elder care assessment and referrals. This is not 30 minutes for a quick consultation because it's never, ever that uncomplicated, and it's not working with a counselor. We have access to elder care resource specialists who just start off with you. It's an ongoing telephonic sort of dialogue, but they start off with a needs assessment because we don't even know what to ask. All you need is a zip code for that aging parent, and they'll be prepared to kind of talk you through a little bit about, what is medically necessary versus what might be community-based, zip code oriented, because sometimes it's more community or it's more state, okay? So to schedule an EAP appointment, if you're looking for the counseling part of it, understand we are still providing phone sessions or Zoom virtual appointments. We do have day and evening appointments available. We are available 24/7, and we are definitely here when you need us, as you need us. So I'm going to conclude that and really just check the chat room to see if there are any questions, or Wendy, if you've been able to capture any inquiries yourself. I don't see any chat, which is fine. I will tell you that Wendy will be sending out a survey. Please fill that out and get that back to us. We appreciate any and all feedback. By all means, we really want to capture some feedback, because the last question on that survey is what other topics you might be interested in. As an example, as an EAP, we are thinking of launching a weekly, just a drop-in group, where there is just kind of a tidbit or a granule, of kind of food for thought, an actionable strategy as an example, right? So it's those types of things. What else do you think you could use from Marquette University as far as a training topic, but also potentially as a topic from the Employee Assistance Program? So I really appreciate your attendance. I don't see any questions, but thank you for taking your time out of your day and just attending. I wish you all well. Take care.